we had a huge opportunity after 9/11 to bring the world together and to bring our country together around a common agenda, especially including, helping the least fortunate nations among us, precisely because it has a practical impact and there's a moral imperative. So there's a leadership aspect here, and I think what Senator Biden would say is there's a thirst, a hunger in this country to actually do this. I don't think it's that hard to sell, but the second thing is this. You have to be able to get the job done. And that's about not just experience, it's about a practical track record. Senator Biden is the guy who got debt relief done in the 1990s for the most heavily indebted countries. He is the guy who got UN arrears taken care of. He has a track record of actual achievement in getting these things done. It's not just about going around the world, meeting with these people. It's actually about getting results here in Washington, and these gentlemen know that better than anyone else.
One of the things Senator Biden has also called for is what he terms an oversight group within the United Nations to enforce commitments in Iraq and beyond. What does that mean, and what would that involve?
One of the biggest mistakes we've made in Iraq is not making Iraq the world's problem. It's just our own problem, and the target has been on our backs for 4 years. What is missing in this administration is any recognition that the problems in Iraq are actually the concern not just of the United States, but of the major powers in the world and Iraq's neighbors. And we have failed utterly to try at least to engage them on that common interest. And some of those common interests have been alluded to. So, for example, the Europeans, much as they may be happy to sit on the sidelines right now, if the choice is between the status quo and Iraq getting even worse, with the problem spilling over its borders into the region, possibly having effects on them at home, oil prices, immigration, etc., they have an incentive.
And Joe Biden's going to get them in where
I can tell you this, Joe Biden was at the United Nations about
He's going to get them on the ground where they've all pulled out?
Not in terms of troops, but in terms of political engagement, in terms of enforcing commitments from neighbors.
What does that mean, political engagement?
It means, look, one of the things we did very successfully in the Balkans and we did in Afghanistan is we set up a contact group, an oversight group of concerned countries to work with constituents in the country in question with whom they had a relationship and leverage and influence. We can do the same thing in Iraq. He was at the United Nations 6 weeks ago. He met with the Permanent 5 Ambassadors of the Security Council, and he asked them a simple question. If the United States came to you today and asked your countries to take part in an active oversight group for Iraq, would they say yes? And the Chinese, the Russian, the Brit, the French all said yes. This administration hasn't asked.
Another question from the floor. This is a good one, and let's just go right around the table here on this. But I'm going to ask you to be succinct because this should fit in a line or two, frankly. What's the one trait that makes your candidate the best foreign policy candidate? Senator Dodd.
Chris Dodd walks the walk, doesn't just talk the talk. He has shown people that he is committed to not only understand them, but to work with them. And he shows the strength and the bold leadership to make sure that when he does act, it's based on principle, but also the interests of this country.
Okay. Governor Richardson.
Governor Richardson served as the ambassador to the United Nations. In that role and in his subsequent role as governor of New Mexico, he has reached out to countries around the world to try to engage them. I believe when you look at the resumes from him being a member of Congress, a cabinet secretary twice in the Clinton administration, and governor, you will see an executive that's going to get things done on an international basis.
Senator Clinton.
Well, first of all, I think Senator Clinton has the vast experience as First Lady. She traveled to over 82 countries, and as Senator, she's been to dozens more countries. She's met with every world leader, and I think the day she gets elected president, she will instantly help rebuild the lost credibility that the United States has suffered under George Bush. But for me, what I find most appealing about her candidacy when it comes to foreign policy is that I think she is a candidate and a person who truly understands the greatness of the United States of America. I think she is somebody who knows that our power should not be measured solely in terms of our military might, but also in our ability to be able to help create a global community for good, to help end poverty, to help end hunger. And that is what her career has been about, and that's what her legislation on these issues has been about. So I think that just as much as her experience and her ability to lead makes her, I think, the best candidate for president.
Okay, but for the one trait that makes your candidate the best.
Now you see, I'm going to ignore that, but in my defense...
No, that's a question from the floor. You cannot ignore a question from the floor.
Well, I'm not going to ignore it. I'm just going to give you 3 instead of 1.
No, that's not right.
Well, it is right. The other people gave more than 1, so unfortunately, I will be brief. Number one, I think he has a diverse background, which I think will help him connect with people from the rest of the world. His father was African. He lived in Indonesia. He is not American-centric, and one of the great biases out there in the world is that Americans only care about Americans. Second, he has wisdom on foreign policy. If you read the speech he gave before the Iraq War in 2002, it nails spot on both what our responsibilities should have been and what the results of the war were going to be. And that was 5 years ago from someone who supposedly doesn't have enough experience, so he has wisdom and understanding. And lastly, he brings people together. He's made a lot of this, but when he campaigns, he does not do it divisively. If there's a group of people who disagrees with him, that's the people he wants to reach out and connect with. He brings people together.
Senator Edwards.
Senator
One
Edwards,
trait.
I'll say it, and I'll let you do the counting.
It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it, right?
Senator Edwards understands that we have to pick judiciously between military might, our hard power in the world, and our soft power in the world to restore our credibility, our moral authority, our legitimacy in the eyes of the world, and to repair our battered friendships.
Senator Biden.
Straight talk.
Wow. Okay. All right. Let's move on. In a recent speech, Senator Clinton said there's no better way, I'm quoting here, there's no better way to combat anti-Americanism than to do our best to demonstrate that America is invested in lifting people up around the world. Now, during the last Democratic administration, funding for foreign assistance fell significantly. So the question is, what role should development and diplomacy programs play in the next administration? Let me let you start that, and let me then invite all of you to just sort of jump in and make this a discussion point. I'd ask you to be brief so we can open this up and move it around, but also specific.
No, look, I think that investing in development aid is important, and I think Senator Clinton believes that very much so. I mean, one of her top initiatives is this bill called the Education for All bill, and understanding that too much of the world, quite frankly, doesn't have access to education. Too much of the world is illiterate. If you don't provide people these educational opportunities, then these developing countries will never develop. She's also a strong supporter of the so-called McGovern-Dole International School Feeding Program, understanding that if you feed children, they will come to school, more girls will go to school, and it's an important way of empowering women. So, you know, committing to big, bold ideas like that, I think can, not only help repair our damaged image around the world, but can help mightily, in drying up those swamps where terrorists like Osama bin Laden go to look for recruits.
It's a jump ball, folks.
I would add just one thing. I think focusing the resources of public-private partnerships, there's been more private money
There hasn't been much talk about that
dedicated to anti-poverty campaigns, and it really works because you leverage the resources. It's the Global AIDS Fund. The Global AIDS Fund gets all the money from everywhere and then tries to figure out how best to spend it to combat AIDS, and it's worked quite well. And I have heard Senator Obama talk about leveraging those private dollars and combining them with public, and also allowing the private sector to use some of their ideas free of some of the preconceived notions and bureaucracy that governments may bring to it. They've had fabulous success. Certainly, I'll put a plug for the Gates Foundation from the Pacific Northwest.
And the Clinton
spending
Foundation.
a little bit of money. Yeah, Clinton Foundation
too.
We don't have an
Any
Obama
other
Foundation
foundations?
yet. But I think leveraging those dollars is one good idea.
Anybody else? I can go
Well,
ahead.
this is what I have said in response to every question. And when I spoke a minute ago of soft power, of smart power, this is smart power, is using our force in the world to work with our allies to improve the lives of people around the world, and people who are not living lives of desperation, who are not in impoverished societies with no hope in sight, are much more likely to support stable societies that are also in our interest.